Now, we cannot wait to introduce you to our next speaker. So please welcome Pierre Libovici from Mediacité. Mediacité is a French organization dedicated to investigative report. And Pierre is going to tell us how the Mediacité staff adapted quickly when the COVID-19 started, and they were completely involved covering the local elections in France. Pierre is going to tell us also how this flexibility helped the media not just to increase the engagement with the members, but also to become this audience into paying members. So Pierre, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Anna, and what to add after this great introduction. Hi everyone. I'm going to tell you how we've been working at Mediacité with our readers during the peak of the pandemic in France. Just a few words before talking about that, about Mediacité, about who we are. So we produce investigative and participatory journalism in France. We're a community-driven organization and also a multi-city news organization. So we have 4 local editions in France, based in Lille, Lyon, Nantes, and Toulouse. We launched in late 2016, and so far we've been producing more than 1,500 investigative stories. We focus mainly on politics, but also on environment issues and health issues, culture, sports, so anything where we can investigate on, in our cities. And we are supported by 400, more than 4,000 members, so who pay for our journalism each month or each year. And it's like 90% of our revenue comes from our members, so this is really important for us. I also have to mention at Mediacité, we're also a team of 10 full-time people, including 7 journalists. So covering the COVID-19 pandemic in our 4 cities with reactive journalism was a huge challenge for us. And it was really a challenge because we've been really focused at Mediacité on city elections, as Anna said. So just for you to know, to give you a bit of context, the city elections were like the most important moment for us to try to convert many more members. We switched from a subscription-based model to a membership-based model almost 1 year ago now. So it was like a pivot to membership to better serve the needs of our audience. And we launched several new products that were really 100% focused on the city elections that were supposed to happen in March 2020. So I think this context is important because at the core of our identity, our mission is that, investigate on local powers with in-depth journalism and not hard news journalism. So this is what we were doing. And the pandemic happened. So the first one of city elections happened in France on March the 15th. 2 days after that, President Macron imposed a lockdown. And the day after, on March 18th, we had launched our landing page about the coronavirus with a set of participatory activities for our members and non-members to participate to our journalism. So maybe for the first time at Mediacité, we didn't others thought, we had to react quickly as every one of you, as any news organization. So here is the landing page we've been launching. So the day after the lockdown. So in French, it was called Nos villes à l'heure du coronavirus. So it means our cities in time of coronavirus. And we really decided to focus on engaged journalism to cover the pandemic with three main engaged journalism activities. So the first one was a forum for people to ask questions about the virus in their city. We were expecting to have questions about local rumors mainly, but that was not the case. I will tell you about that in a few seconds. We were also asking for our readers' expertise because the fact is, at Mediacité, with a newsroom of 7 journalists, no one of us was specialized only on health topics, you know. So it was really crucial for us to rely on the expertise of doctors, of teachers, also to tell us how the things were going with the students. And we also published a set of explainers containing really basic information, verified information, as many newsrooms did, to really produce easy to understand journalism for all our communities. So to tell you a bit about the questions we have been receiving during the pandemic. Overall, we received almost 300 questions in like a period of 3 weeks, and we answered around 10% of them. So that's not that much, you know, compared to many legacy news organizations. This is really nothing. I remember that the Le Monde, so one of the main national newspaper in France, has been receiving as much as 12,000 questions a day. So we are not speaking about the same scale, you know, but even for us, it was a huge huge number of contributions to deal with. And here are some examples of the questions we've been receiving. So for example, are we allowed to go to the post office to pick up a registered mail despite the lockdown? Or can I reuse a face mask if I heat it? These kind of questions were really very far from our culture, you know, of in-depth investigative journalism at Mediacité. We allowed any people to ask us questions, whether they were members or non-members. And as I said previously, we really were expecting people to ask us questions about rumors, you know, local rumors, about anxiety, about the pandemic. And actually, the questions were very practical and maybe very French, I would say. Because there were mainly questions about rules, you know, what can I do, what I am allowed to do. So maybe you know that in Chinese, France is called Faguo, which can be translated as the country with laws, you know, and this is really what we've been experiencing with that tool. So what was interesting with all these questions, as I told you, it wasn't our culture to answer them, but we received our answers were really popular because we've been breaking, you know, many records in terms of audience, like many other news organizations at the time. And how could we launch such a tool? You know, we have been actually reshaping an existing product. We have been preparing for the city elections. This tool was called Véracité. So it was really a fact-checking tool for people to ask questions about city elections, and in 24 hours we could reshape it, and it was really important for us that this existing tool was there, because we already had put processes in place, you know, inside the newsroom to try to answer to our readers. We also reshaped another product to ask our readers' expertise. So this product is called Dans ma ville, in my town, and so this is our platform for collaborative investigations. We developed it with the help of the membership puzzle project, and on this platform we ask our readers basic questions like, what do you want to know about that topic? And we also ask them to share their expertise on a specific topic. So we could also, in the course of a day, completely rebuild our platform to ask our readers to collaborate and to share their expertises about the coronavirus. And last, we have been reusing all the tech stack we have been putting in place to deal with the contributions from readers. So we really we have been working a lot with Airtable. So basically, when a reader asks a question, it is registered in databases on Airtable, and our Airtables are connected to Slack. So this way, we are notified, quickly. We know who has to react, after a contribution was sent by a reader, and so we were really thankful that we already developed this kind of tools to try to react quickly to readers' contributions. So 2 weeks after the launch of our landing page, we were really surprised at Mediacité about what do people think about our work, because we were like, we had a shift in our identity, producing hard news and really answering practical questions from the audience. So we decided to survey our members, only our members, just to better know what they thought about our coverage during 2 weeks about the COVID-19 pandemic. And it turned out that 90% of our members said they were satisfied with our coverage, but only a quarter of them actually read our answers to readers' questions. So that was really important for us to notice that the practical questions, all the answers we have been producing to the practical questions from the audience were not really read by our members, but mostly by a new audience, people who didn't know Mediacité at first. So it really made us wonder very big questions, such as to what extent should we listen to our audience, to which communities, should we produce journalism, and even what is our social role, as a news organization in times of crisis? Shall we produce journalism for our members, for the people with who we make money with, or should we produce journalism for anyone, especially in these times of pandemic? So these were the kind of questions we were wondering, and we also asked our members what they wanted to read next. So you've been reading only COVID-19 stories on Mediacité in the past 2 weeks. So what do you want now? And these were really interesting insights we got with this survey, because almost 70% of them told us they wanted Mediacité to cover other topics than the COVID-19 pandemic, and almost the same percentage of them told us they wanted to read solutions, local solutions, about the pandemic. So I think this was the first time our audience really expressed that need of reading solutions-based journalism. And so this is what we decided to do at Mediacité. So a few weeks after, we launched a new landing page that was really 100% focused on solutions journalism. The objective of this landing page was really to identify local responses to the pandemic with the help from readers. So we asked our readers 3 main questions, such as what has been revealed by the pandemic that we should keep in our cities. We also asked them if they had spot any local initiative related to the pandemic that could be replicated, in other towns in France. And we also asked them if they had any expertise related to the local initiatives they have been spotting. So for the first time, we launched really a series about a solutions-based journalism series, and it was really a new mindset for our editorial team and for all the freelance journalists we work with, because for the first time, we were not only investigating about the wrongdoing, we were not trying to hold the local powers, accountable for what they do, but we were trying to find positive stories that were meaningful, for after the pandemic in our cities. So we've been publishing 14 solution stories. And we surveyed our members again during the summer, asking them what did they thought about this solutions journalism coverage, and 70% of them told us they were really satisfied about these stories. So speaking to finish about the traffic and the revenue we have made during the pandemic. So like any news organization, we had a huge audience compared to an average month on Mediacité. So we had almost 400,000 unique visitors on our website only in March 2020, and we gained on the period between March and June 800 members, which is quite a lot for us because we only have 4,000 members at the time. So I think we've been a bit shy at the beginning of the pandemic when it came to asking for money, because we really had a few new members at the beginning of the pandemic, and we decided to open a lot of our articles at the time. After that, we put in place our paywall again on most of our stories, except all the stories that were answers to the questions from readers. And we also sent dedicated call to actions with emails written by different members from the organization, to ask for our readers to support us. So as a conclusion, what did we learn, in trying to engage our readers with in that period of COVID-19 pandemic? First, we were very lucky that we could reuse, existing solutions we have been developed to make our members participate to our journalism. That was really important for us because we didn't have to build from scratch any technology. We also began to rely highly on surveys to get feedback from our audience, and I think these surveys have been showing humility, on our side, and could also lead to more confidence from our audience. We were really inspired by the experience of Crowd Reporter, as a German news organization that is really used to survey its members. And actually, I think they'll be speaking in a few minutes at this News Impact Summit. We also took the opportunity of introducing new editorial formats at Mediacité, and we also gave up with some others that weren't relevant at the time of the pandemic. And I would say that it is really important when you ask for your readers' participation to really, of course, define internally what you expect, but also spend a lot of time to explain members what do you need, what information do you need, not to create frustration if you don't use any contribution, and also to show that well, this is useful, to contribute, and so we try to value better all the contributions we have been getting from our contributors. So I think this is time for questions.
Yes, indeed, Pierre. Thank you so much. I would like to tell you that everybody was writing here that they love Mediacités. So we will have some questions. So we start with Laura Oliver. She says, really love this engaged service journalism approach. You mentioned that you opened this to non-members too. Did you learn anything from this work in terms of how to grow your membership?
Yeah, I think this is what I was saying just a few seconds before. I think we really have been learning how to ask for contributions. At the beginning of the pandemic, we also put in place a wall, on our landing page about coronavirus, where we published testimonies, experiences as they were lived by people in our cities. So teachers were explaining how they were doing with their students and anything. And we realized that it wasn't very interesting, this kind of contributions without any editorial work. And for example, this is one of the formats we gave up. And I think we've been learning that if we want to ask our readers to contribute, they really have a few attention for us, a few time, a few minutes to give to us. So we have to really make the most of that time and to ask concrete questions about things we are going to reuse in our stories. So I think this is the main takeaway we have from yes, all the contributions we've been asking for during the pandemic. And I also think it was very useful to better communicate about why you should support Mediacité. Like many news organizations, we've been highlighting our public service journalism mission, during the pandemic. And so we introduced a few automated emails sent to our new members after the pandemic to better explain them our mission, how do we spend their money. And these are things, we've been introducing during the pandemic when we try to tell the people, well, if you don't support us, we'll die, and you need that information. So please support us.
Nice. We have one from Jacob Granger here that asks, what's an example of a story your members have helped you to tell because of their expertise that you wouldn't have been able to cover otherwise?
That's a great question. Actually, we hired sources, if I may say, thanks to the landing page. For example, in the medical sector, so people just telling us, yeah, I'm working as an epidemiologist or as a doctor, and I'd like to share this thing. And they weren't always quoted, because they didn't want their name to be public. But for example, we've been publishing stories about how to understand the figures behind the pandemic, you know, and this story was really made from a contribution from a reader. So this is an example among others. We've been producing also a lot of investigative stories in the weeks after the lockdown, you know. But at the beginning, most of the contributions were leading to practical answers to these questions, such as shall I go to the post office?
So to finish, we have one question more from Linda Beckvagare. So Linda asks, how do you choose which questions to answer?
That's a great question. Actually, some of the questions weren't relevant because they were about other cities than the ones we are covering, you know. So this is what I was trying to say about explain your members what you need, you know, what type of contribution you need. We really highlighted that we were only answering questions about our 4 cities. So that was one of the one example of questions we didn't take into account. And I think day after day we've been selecting questions where Mediacité really had when only Mediacité could answer, you know. So we were answering more about political questions, for example, such as what happens if my mayor dies, you know, because of the pandemic. Very practical questions, but also very interesting, you know, when you're living in a city and you know that your mayor has just contracted the COVID-19. So we've been selecting, the questions that were I think more aligned with our mission and with our identity in the next weeks. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Pierre. Thank you for your time here today with us.
Thanks, Pierre. We love how Mediacité saw the pandemic as an opportunity to explain to its members why it exists and to highlight the added value of its journalism.